Hello, and welcome to this video where we will be looking at a recently published paper titled Exploring Culture Variation in Moral Judgment with Large Language Models. The core question this paper is asking are large language models actually reflect culturally diverse moral values? The paper is authored by Hadi Mohammed and his colleagues, who works in Department of Methodology and Statistics, University of Utrecht here in Netherlands. The paper starts with the research question whose main aim is to compare various LLMs from a smaller monolingual to advanced instruction trained models and compare it against the human judgment on the moral values that has been collected by two major surveys. One of the surveys is the World Value Survey, and the second one is the Pew Research Center's Global Attitude Survey, which was conducted in 2013. The study, in a nutshell, concludes that the advanced instruction-led LLMs, for example, GPT-4o, 4o-mini, and others, demonstrates a substantial higher positive correlation with the real-world moral attitude compared to earlier or smaller models, which basically suggest that as the size of the model increased using the instruction tuning, the alignment with which the model is predicting the moral values compared to the human values are quite matching with each other. Of course, the reality is not also without the challenges. So there are persistent challenges in terms of the models are getting trained on Western-centric biases, which means the values are majorly in English-speaking are from English-speaking countries. There are significant discrepancies in certain regions and on certain topics. For example, political violence, having violence against women, beating the wife, etc. And in terms of looking at the overall picture, there is no single model which consistently excels across all the countries with varying performances, taking into consideration the different regional context. The study therefore do emphasize that while the progress has been made by leveraging on the increased size of the model, there still needs to be further efforts that needs to be done to address the inherent biases in terms of improving training data, putting diversity, and refining the evaluation protocol, which is used to judge the values out of the model. Some key findings from this research paper in terms of the LLM bias and towards the culture sensitivity. Inherent biases are at large embedded in this model. These biases therefore can be amplified upon large scale deployment, which have societal impact. The Western-centric default in terms of the research shows that LLM often exhibit Western-centric biases, majorly from English-speaking countries. Fairness concern, is the representation complete, particularly in context of moral judgment, because what is morally right for you in one country may not be due to cultural differences. And the risk of propagating and perpetuating bias as LLM are globally deployed, they may be taken as a standard as representation for all, In terms of the methodology that has been used and the improvement that may further entail, the benchmark data, as said, use two well-known surveys. But ingesting this data in LLM is done through prompting techniques, which is converting those values into mindful instruction-tuned prompts, which helps model learn the way it has learned its values. The evaluation matrix that has been used is a Pearson correlation, which measures the alignment between the model prediction and the survey scores. The cluster alignment compares how model group countries based on model scores, and then absolute error, which quantifies the deviation of model prediction from human survey responses. In terms of the performance of different LLM architecture, it has been shown that the instruction-tuned models are doing better. For example, when you look at the Pearson coefficient value for GPT-4o and gamma, it is in range of 0.5 to 0.4. Compare this to the earlier smaller model, the values were in range and sometimes negatively correlated to tune of 0.15. Therefore, there is a huge mismatch between what the large models are showing and what the previous smaller models were capable of doing. It is important to note that scaling and instruction tuning are the key, which means the scaling models and using tailored training based on the instruction and the data set to capture the viewpoint, to capture the context, therefore to improve the model judgment alignment is very important. If you look at the hard topics that this paper tried to reflect in terms of also covering the areas of divergences, it shows the inconsistent country level performance. No model consistently were able to perform across all countries. For example, Falcon has a strong support in parts of Middle East, while it shows the area of divergence with the surveyed population and may not have done well in other, for example, European countries. Systematic misalignment of sensitive issues, topics like political violence, suicide, stealing properties, etc. These moral questions have extreme societal ramifications. And that is something not captured well by all the models. There are about 8 points that this paper looked into, covering on each aspect, and the results varied. In terms of the paper's limitation, like any other studies, it has both the study limitation and also the ethical limitation that is associated with it. In terms of study limitation, the data aggregated is from 2 surveys. The prompt simplification has been done to ingest the data to make aware of the full context requirement, which was not possible by any other means. The model heterogeneity, differences due to the size, instruction tuning, and the way a model has been trained may have impacted the study. And different elicitation methods. For example, the local method that has been used in the chat models may be different than what you actually see in the unified comparison output in some of the other models. In terms of the ethical consideration, misrepresentation of minority view is a main concern. It could be that a small fraction of population where some of the issues are more dominant than the other are not heard of. Applying this in an automated decision will already create a blind spot in terms of creating a skewed view which do not truly or probably reflect the public opinion. It may end up resulting in undermining public trust. Significant misalignment on controversial topics can happen. And it requires that the mitigation strategy needs to be put in place to indulge diverse voices so that regular evaluation of the cultural issues can be done in a more transparent way. Some of the recommendation that the paper has attributed is enhance the training data diversity to cover the context, target the bias mitigation, remove the bias as much as you can in terms of removing cultural stereotype and sensitive moral issues, refine evaluation protocol which can look more deeply into heterogeneity, moral context, etc. Emphasize on human oversight so that it doesn't become an automated system on its own, standalone running mode. Increase the transparency as to where the data is collected, what has gone inside in that data collection to limit the bias and eliminate the known bias. And of course, do collaborate with the cultural expert to gain from their wisdom and apply this in a real world context. The conclusion is this study does throw a great deal of aspects and light on the instruction tune model, that they are becoming better. However, it must be taken with a huge pinch of salt that significant work remains to be achieved in a universal cultural alignment. Therefore, the current model, the way they exhibit the values, are still struggling and will continue to struggle with the sensitive, culturally nuanced topic. I must thank all the authors of this paper for doing this great work and bringing this ever important topic to the fore with a solid recommendation of looking into this more diligently in the future with various other domains, including different stakeholders, and continue the efforts therein. Thanks for listening and keep learning.